Hey guys, welcome back to the Short Term Show. Today I have my partner in crime and co-founder of the Short Term Shop, Cashflow Carl, the multifamily madman, Mr. Luke Carl. Thank you for stopping by.
It's my pleasure. Yes. I have many nicknames. And this is really weird, but I'm hoping that maybe you'll learn something about me.
Possibly. So, why don't you get started by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you were doing before you got into real estate and how you got into real estate investing?
Man, I've done everything, right? So back in the day, I'm originally from the Midwest. I grew up in humble beginnings. My father was a Vietnam. He's a Vietnam vet, which is awesome, and he's a retired mailman. And my mother cut hair in the house that I grew up in, and so nice, very very nice blue collar upbringing. And I moved to New York City when I was 20. Got into the bar business. I ended up owning my own a little slice of a tiny little rock and roll bar in New York City by the age of 25. And shortly thereafter began my landlording career, although I didn't know it at the time. So what happened was I just kind of found a house, apartment for rent in New York that I moved into, and my roommate had the lease, and it was, X amount of dollars per month. And then next thing I know, she says, "Hey, I'm moving out. My landlord is really cool. They're not going to care or even know what's going on. Do you want to take over the lease?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sweet." So, and again, I'm like 25 years old. And so I went down to the office of this landlord. They own like the whole neighborhood in Brooklyn, and signed the lease, and they never came and looked. And then at this point, I found out how much the actual rent was of this apartment versus what I was paying. So I was paying a good 2/3 of the rent, and light bulbs went off in my brain. And my roommate at the time was living in what was the living room, and she put a curtain up. So I went so far as to build a wall, move somebody in, and then I was charging them like 3/4 of the rent. And then that's kind of how my my landlording career began. After that, I stayed in the bar business for quite some time. I ended up in the radio business, which I'm still in part-time today. I met you, and we moved to Nashville. And then basically for me anyway, I know your story is slightly different, but I was there as well. And, that's my story is that we moved from New York, where it's $1 million to buy anything, and all of a sudden we could afford to buy a house. And that was kind of how my house buying career started. We bought a house to live in outside of Nashville, and I fell in love with that process. I said, "There's something to this process here." I kind of gravitated towards the inspector in the house buying, our very first house buying process, and I ended up going to home inspector school because I thought, there was something in that process there for me. I just didn't know what it was. So I gravitated towards the home inspector, went to home inspector school, quickly realized that was not for me. Even though it was like every penny I had to go to that, to go to that school and weekend of my life. But anyway, a whole weekend. So I think somewhere in there, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do, but the buying of the house was really something I was super interested in, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about what your first deal looked like.
Well, the first deal was a primary, and so we bought this house it was nice. It didn't really need rehab or anything, but we moved in and ended up rehabbing it. So it did turn into a burr. And I didn't know what that was at the time. I had no idea. And you were there. So I had no idea hadn't read Rich Dad at this point yet, but we bought this nice little farmhouse out in the country. And moved into it, rehabbed it because we had to. The septic, it was in the country, so the septic failed. Had to redo the septic, which is I found out years later that's not common. That was actually a rare situation. Septics generally perform pretty well. I own several of them today. And then ended up doing the kitchen, countertops, things like this, new HVAC, because the HVAC died. We had no choice. So we ended up over time, new windows, redoing this house. That house kind of has a long story. I'll finish it up now, though, so we don't have to come back to it. We lived in it for 5 years, somewhere in that area, put a tenant in it. After 2 years of the tenant, 2.5 years of the tenant, we ended up, and in the meantime, we did HELOC that house and used that to buy another property, which we still own and that property crushes it. So that house I bought for free, essentially. And so I lived in it. I burned it, house hacked, I guess you would say. I house hacked it. HELOC'd it to buy another property, moved a tenant into it, and then ultimately sold it before the 2 out of the last 5 rule. So we sold it tax free and ended up putting that back into the business. And it did go into other properties and rehabs. It just wasn't a situation where we had to 1031 because we took advantage of the 2 out of the last 5. So, but anyway, somewhere in there, we ended up buying our first rental property.
Let's dive into the rental property, your first rental. Let's talk about that one. How'd you find it? Where'd you find it? What was the process there?
Yeah, so we fell in love with this house buying thing, and we said, okay, what do we got to do next? Okay, we had success, and it was just at the time it seemed like such a scary thing. And so we said, what are we going to do? How are we going to buy another one? And I sat down with a yellow pad and a piece of paper, Miracle Morning style, way before I knew what that was. And I did some math, and I figured out that if we lived on $20 a day for 18 months.
Hang on. Who did the math and figured out if you lived on $20 a day for 18 months?
I mean, I just, because you're not that big of a fan of math, I just assumed it was me, but maybe not.
Continue.
So we lived on $20 a day. I think technically it was $20 one day, $30 the next each for 18 months. And our goal was to simply buy a $100,000 property for 20% down because we just heard through the grapevine it was 20% down on an investment. And that's exactly what we did. It ended up taking us 17 months. We bought a house that was exact kind of, where we wanted it to be. It was a more difficult process than I'm making it sound. At least at the time it was. Looking back on it, it was really kind of nothing. But when you're new and all that stuff is very scary. But I walked into that house for the first time, and you were there, obviously, and I think we both agreed there was nothing going to stop us from buying that thing. So we did, and still own it, and that one's turning into quite a story now as well. It's still got the original tenant. It has been slightly rehabbed. It was in pretty good shape when we bought it. I've done a new deck. It's got a new HVAC going in, new roof. So it's being sort of flipped right now, and I'm preparing it for sale because it's outside of Nashville, and it's had a ton of equity injected into it due to Nashville. And we're just basically waiting for that lease to expire and going to 1031 that into an apartment building, or at least more than half of an apartment building, I think is how that's going to end up working out.
Awesome. So when was that you bought your first single family long-term?
First single family long-term we bought in 2000, I want to say 13, maybe 14.
Is that the house hack or the first true investment property?
The one we moved into was 12, I believe. Might have been 13. And then the investment was 13 or 14. Am I mistaken?
Yes.
Well, tell me then. I have no idea.
I think that first investment was like 15 or 16, but that's
maybe.
Fine. So why short term? When did you buy your first short term? How many long terms did you own before you got a short term? Tell me a little bit about that.
That was you. That was all you for sure. I'm definitely going to give you credit on that. I never even heard of this thing before. And short term, I do want to, you hear short term and it has like a stigma, and it can sometimes, for somebody that doesn't know what we do, it's a whole, they're more used to like the arbitrage type thing where you kind of rent your cousin's closet, but for us, it was simply, okay, we want to buy another property. Nashville has now all of a sudden in these 18 months become too hot. What are we going to do? And it was your idea. You grew up in the South, and you grew up going to the mountains with your family. And you said to me, let's go buy a cabin in the woods, in the mountains. And I thought to myself, well, why, if there's cabins out there, why have we been sleeping in a tent? Because we were going to the mountains all the time anyway. It was just right down the road. And
I hate tent camping, by the way.
I'll never did not go well. So I said, well, let's buy this. Let's buy a cabin. I don't think we were even married yet. And so we bought this first cabin, scared to death, had no idea what we were doing. We lost a lot of sleep over it. I certainly did. And nobody was doing it at the time. I think I did back then what is now called the enemy method. And I searched every property on the internet, trying to find some answers and get some answers. Nobody could help us. There was just nobody out there. I ended up finding two people that were self-managing, and one of them was doing some kind of weird thing where he had like 55 properties and a lot of partners involved, and he didn't want to talk to me. And then I found this lovely woman who owned two properties, and she lived in Memphis. And I thought to myself, well, she's doing it from Memphis. I can certainly do this from much closer. And she gave me, she was nice enough to get on. She was my enemy. I ended up getting her on the phone. I don't recommend that, by the way. It's probably a complete waste of time, but she was very sweet, and she just was basically like, hey, I'm doing this and you can do it too. And that's really all it kind of took. We ended up buying that first one, and it went wonderfully. And then next thing you know, we ended up with 5 in 1 year, 5 of those short-term, those log cabins in 1 year.
Okay, so let's unpack a little bit about your enemy helping you, because there's going to be a lot of people who are listening to this who maybe don't have a mentor, or, are buying in an area where they just, there's not a lot of people doing it, and there's not, maybe there's not a short-term shop of that area to help them do that. So talk a little bit about how you got some random person on Airbnb to talk to you about the process.
I mean, everything in life is a pitch, right? So, I mean, I just said, I need to find somebody who's done this just to make sure that I can actually do this. And it turned out at the time, 6 years ago, whatever it was, clearly we have different dates on this. I don't know, but
yeah, you don't remember anything, right? As far as dates go, but that's fine.
I don't remember. I don't even know what day this is, but so, I really just kind of wanted to get a hold of somebody who had done this before. And like I said, I went on Vrbo, and back then it was called VRBO, and Airbnb. And I found what I thought were other people doing this. And most of them turned out they were not. It was a property management company kind of posing as an individual. And I found this out because they would send like a canned response, or, who knows what it may have been back then. But I found what I thought were the only two people that were legitimately renting their own properties in Sevier County at the time. And I pitched myself to this lovely lady, and I said, hey, we want to try this out. And is there any way you could offer me a little bit of advice? And I was as nice as I possibly could be. It's like you hear anywhere, it's you got to provide value. And I didn't have any value to provide her, other than the fact that I was hoping that she would kind of take me as a charity case, which is exactly what I was at the time. And she did. She was very sweet. She was a nurse. She was a kind of a high level, she worked at St. Jude's. So she had a very high demanding job, and worked 70, 80 hours a week. And that was a big part of it. She said, I work 80 hours a week. I live 7 hours each way, and I'm doing this by myself. I had nobody to help me. And she had, I think, 2 or 3 at the time. And I stayed in touch with her for quite some time. I haven't spoken to her. I think she didn't. You end up selling her properties?
Yeah, a few years later, she got out of the game. Her husband had some health problems, and they had quite a bit of equity in their properties, and they were ready to get out. She did not list with me. She for sale by owner, but I did sell it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. Honestly, she was a very do-it-yourself, she'd probably, but, you know, anyways, yeah, so she opened my eyes and off we went.
Yeah. So basically, there is a mentor out there for you if you don't have one or if you don't have somebody to show you the ropes. You can find one. Like this random, very nice woman just started talking to you, some random guy who asked for help on the internet, and she took the time out of her day to help you. So I think that says a lot about, it's not just if you knock on enough doors, one will eventually open.
That's exactly what it is. I'm sure there were more people doing this. It literally took, 15,000 properties worth of me narrowing it down to find this one woman that was a good fit for me. I didn't know what a mentor was. I had no idea. I didn't know that's what I was looking for. I just knew that I don't take no for an answer. I'm going to kick and scream until I get what I need or what I want, or even if I don't know what I want, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get to the next level of whatever it may be. And we ended up buying that first property. It went extremely well. We still own it. And our short-term rental career began.
Yeah, and I'm still on the mentor thing, so we'll get to that in just a second. So it's really all in your approach, I think, of when you are looking for a mentor and you're asking someone for help or to help you with something. It's really important to come across like a real person and not like just a canned response, or not a response, like a canned script basically for getting a mentor that you might hear on a podcast or read online. Like you can't just go up to someone and say, "Hello, would you like to be my mentor? I am a mentee and would like to be treated as such." You do have to be a real person and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a little bit of help. I'm about to make this big investment. Could I borrow 5 minutes of your time?" And just be real with them.
That's how I got to her. I didn't know what a mentor was. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just super real, and it worked in my favor.
Awesome. That's the nugget that I was trying to get out of that. So tell me a little bit so we scaled to 5 short-term rentals in our portfolio within about a year. And I had somebody ask me yesterday, well, how do people do that? Are they just sitting on a ton of money that they can use for down payments? Or is there something that I don't know? Is there some kind of creative way to do this?
We had no money. When Avery and I first met, again, it's my lovely bride here. A little weird, but when we first met, you already know this. The lovely folks that are listening don't. We didn't have anything. I was getting out of the bar business, starting a new career in radio, and we were both bartenders basically. And Avery ended up going back to school, and we literally had, we were doing okay. I had a decent job, but certainly no extra money. And we just made it work. Honestly, if you're asking me how I got those 5, I don't even know. I really don't know. It just kind of happened. We ended up using, like I said, a HELOC to get I think the second one. We cashed out part of my 401k to get, which was probably almost all of my 401k to get maybe one of the third one. I'm not exactly sure. We got in a car accident. That was a horrible story. I don't even know if you want me to tell that story. It's fairly interesting, but
yeah, sure. I mean, nobody was actually hurt. So go ahead, tell the story.
Avery and I were in Texas. It was a friend of mine's wedding, my best friend in life, Ryan, and we drove to Texas and went to the wedding, and on the way home we had a terrible accident. Avery was driving, and a large pickup truck coming towards us in the other lane, it was a 2-lane 50-mile-an-hour highway, 55, had a food truck hooked to the back of the dually pickup truck, like a 3,500 Ram or something. The food truck was this big, giant enclosed thing, like a barbecue food truck, and it came unhitched from the dually and came into our lane and hit us head on at 55 miles an hour. It was horrible. I don't even like talking about it. I don't want to think about it, but we ended up.
You didn't actually see it happen though, because you were asleep. So
I
have
was
the
asleep.
image of it coming towards me to live with for the rest of my life. At least you were asleep.
I was asleep. I woke up to smoke and my not even wife yet screaming. And my gut instinct was to jump on her. I said, "Are you okay? Can you move?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, go run that way." Because I saw most of the accident was the other way. I said, "Run the opposite direction," because there was like propane tanks everywhere, and they were leaking. And I thought maybe we were going to have an explosion. So I said, "Go run that way." And it was horrible. So we went through, I don't know, 8-10 months of rehab, and ended up getting a check, and that check went straight to another down payment. It wasn't much money. It was enough to barely, maybe not even cover a down payment on another property, which I'm still, it was a horrible situation, but I'm proud of us for doing that. Most people would have went out and bought, something stupid, but we did the right thing with it, and then we ended up getting a partner. We had enough of them at this point and we had a little bit of experience, and you start talking about these things in your life. And I was randomly at a bar with a very close friend, a dude I knew for quite some time. And we all of a sudden digital deadbolt came up in conversation. And I said, "How the hell do you know what that is?" And he said, I own some short-term rentals in Florida. And next thing you know, we went into business together because he wanted to get, more properties, and it worked out pretty well.
Pavan, yes, he's actually a guest on another episode of the podcast, so you guys can hear his story as well, separate from ours.
And we did eventually get out of the partnership. And it worked great. I think we were both very happy, and it went well. He's just still he's even closer friend to me today than he was back then. So it can be done properly. If done properly, it can work. It worked for me.
Okay. So the creative financing that we did, or not necessarily creative financing, but ways to kind of get that capital to make that next down payment. I will mention that we did do a 10% down vacation home loan on the first one. Then we did HELOC, the house that we lived in at the time. And we did cash out a 401k on one, and then we had a partnership with our friend Pavan on the last two of that little sequence. There are a lot of people out there who are listening who are interested in structuring a partnership. Can you talk a little bit about that? How did you have your partnership structured? How did that work? Because I know a lot of people want to go down the partnership road, but they can't figure out how to make it work.
Well, I got lucky. I found the right guy. He had partnered previously in basically the exact same situation in a different market. And he, at the time, still had a day job. He wouldn't be interested in this today. He's full-time now. And back then he needed the help, and I needed the help as well. So, luckily he kind of already knew exactly how this was going to go. And we basically just, we structured it that it was 50-50. He brought the money for the down payment and put the loan in his name. I took title with him. We did it on our personal names to begin with. I think we may have done an entity later. I don't remember. But we took title in my name and his name, and the loan was in his name, and I was the management basically. And he was the money. And then I did have to pay him back the money. It's not like he just brought the down payment and I was the work. I was paying back half of the mortgage to the bank. And then I had a second mortgage with him. Second mortgage is probably not the right term, but that's what it was.
Like a mini mortgage, right?
Mini mortgage for the down payment. So I owed half of the mortgage to the bank every month and half of the down payment back to my partner every month. And that's how it worked out. Would I do this again today? Probably not. I don't need to do it today. It worked out great back then. And he was in a situation back then where he was too busy. He had a day job. So it was perfect. It worked great. And the numbers were, a little lean. We did fine on it. I was happy with it. And it was a great step in my career. And I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, we definitely would not have been able to get to where we are today without that partnership.
And this was before the short-term shop was born, so the systems that the short-term shop has in place, it may have been a different story today. It would have been a different story today, but back then we were still trying to find our way in life, in this life, and one step at a time. And then honestly, I mean, feel free to take this wherever you want. But after those first 5 cabins, it was a landslide. Real estate got, I don't want to say easier, but it was a different story.
The more properties you get, the easier it is to get the next property for sure. So it does seem easier now because we've snowballed into such a large portfolio that it does not take as long to get that next down payment, whether that's for a multi or a single family or what have you.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about systems for management, because you are the management guy. You are the partner in the short-term shop that teaches people how to manage their properties remotely, which is a gigantic piece of investing in short-term rentals. It's very difficult to cash flow well when you have a property manager. So let's talk about first of all, let's start with what constitutes a good deal before we get into the management, because you do have to buy right before you even start, managing correctly. So what constitutes a good deal to you?
Man, it could be any number of things. And today, what a deal is today for me is different than what it was back then. Slightly. Today, I want something that I like, that I think I can market personally, that I would like to stay in, something I can believe in. I don't mind going into a new market, especially as another second home if possible. Because once you have those systems, you can duplicate them anywhere. But I need a property that I mean, honestly, this last one, for instance, let's take a real world example. This last one I bought 2 in the same month. Let's go with one of those 2. I happened to randomly just hop on realtor.com one morning while I was putting on my running shoes. It was a Saturday. And there was this property. It was it was a cabin in the mountains. And I'm like, and I wasn't even looking. I kind of knew, like, I had the opportunity to line up another loan, and that gets a lot easier when you have a lot more properties. And so I said, let me just kind of glance at this. If I were to be interested in a property, it would be need to be one that was big enough for the whole family, because we were at the time getting ready to relocate, and I wanted something that we could come back to whenever we, and stay for extended periods of time. And all of a sudden there it was. It just like literally popped up that second that I happened to look. I called you, and you, being my wife / realtor, you were like, no, I'm busy. I'm not making an offer. And I texted you, and then I called, and I think it was the phone call that made you realize, oh, he's not joking. So I said,
I did not have my realtor hat on at 6:30 a.m. on Saturday. I had my mom hat on. I'm trying to make biscuits with the babies, and you're bugging me. So yeah, I did not want to bother with that house.
Well, and it's a whole, I mean, I have to be careful because I am married to one of the biggest real estate agents in the world. And it's like that old saying, the cobbler's son goes shoeless, so I got to be sensitive in that realm. And I have oftentimes used, in other markets, I certainly use other agents, but, you're the best in the business. So it's a double-edged sword for me. But I called her and I said, hey, I want to buy this house. So then she knew I was serious, and she made the offer, and I came in super strong because, everybody knows the market's red hot. And I told him, I said, listen, here's my offer. You got to take this by like noon or I'm out, like for real. I'm not dealing with other buyers and other highest and best crap. And it worked. It was a gamble. You just never know what's going to work.
Well, yeah. So let me interrupt you for just a second, because that is not going to work in most cases. Most most of the time in the market that we're in right now, as hot as it is, people are going to say, fine, give me a deadline. We're going to get 25 offers. So I'm going to wait on those 25 offers. But what was significant about this situation is I had never seen this agent's name before. So I knew that she was not very experienced in this market. She was a Knoxville agent, which is fine. There are plenty of Knoxville agents that do business in the Smokies, but I never seen her name before in hundreds and hundreds of deals. So I knew she was probably just a friend of the sellers or something. I knew she didn't know exactly how hot it was. So that's why this worked, because I knew she wasn't familiar and that that she wasn't waiting for a multiple offer situation.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that repeatable? Like, if I'm a buyer, can I go cruising for agents that don't know what they're doing, or did I just get lucky?
If you use an agent who does a lot of deals, they're going to know these kinds of things. If you're using an agent who just does like 4 deals a year, they're not going to know that, because, an agent who did 100 deals last year, they're going to know which agents are the most experienced because they will have done the most number of deals with them. So that's why it's important when you're choosing your agent to choose one who is busy, because a not busy agent, while they do have plenty of time to like play around on Zillow with you all day, it's because they're not doing business that they have time to do that. So any of the agents on our team do enough business to know who knows what they're doing and who doesn't, for sure.
Agree. 100%. Agent is the biggest piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, but that's not something that you're going to be able to know as a remote buyer. That's definitely an agent thing. But I didn't mean to interrupt with that. I just wanted to clarify that that's not always going to be repeatable the way the market is right now.
So to answer your question, I need to like the property. Sometimes I have some sort of criteria, like this particular one needed to be a certain size-ish. I wanted a view on this one. I don't always care about a view. This particular one I did. It doesn't have a crazy view, but it fit the box, and we ended up buying it. And I'm not the guy. I don't really sit there and drive myself nuts over the numbers. First of all, I've been doing it so long, I can just look at a house and know exactly how much I can make with that house. So that didn't happen on this one. It wasn't about that. It was, will this fit in my system? Because I've already done this 7 times before, and you hear 7 doors. That's another thing, this door syndrome. Everybody talks about, I've got this many doors. I think a better metric is how much are your doors worth? Because in long-term rental, a door can be 45 grand or, 75 grand is probably pretty average. 45 is low, but 75 grand is pretty average, I think, on especially for multifamily. But, let's say you've got 10 short-term rentals and each one of them 600 grand. So that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have people ask me all the time, well, why do you only have 6 short terms and 30 something long terms? And it's because the portfolios themselves, I think dollar for dollar right now, are almost exactly the same amount, but just a higher number of doors, because a good short-term rental is going to be significantly more expensive than a long-term door.
Yep. And it pumps more out too. It's all relative.
Awesome. So let's get into the management side of things while I have you. So talk to me like I've never done this before. I want to buy a property, or I've got a property. I want to get started in self-management. How do I do that? What do I need? What tools do I need? How do I go?
Well, the easy way to do it is use the short-term shop and come to my class, because it's years of me getting what I call upstream, which is a name of a wonderful book, by the way, of all the problems and issues that I've had and good things. If you have the same good thing happen, well, let me explain upstream. If you have the same thing happen for the third time, that's when it's time to fix it. Go upstream of it, fix the problem before it happens. Again, I get the same comment, question, complaint from a guest, bad review from a guest. These things need to be fixed at the listing level, meaning in my description on Vrbo.com, Airbnb.com, etc., or oftentimes in my check-in message, my welcome message. The difference between those two is if I need the general public to know about it before they purchase my property, it has to go on the listing. If it needs to be something that they don't, if it's not something they need to know until they've actually already paid for the property. Then it goes in the check-in, the welcome message. So getting upstream of issues is number one for me. And for noob situation, obviously the most stressful part, and they're right, and you're right. If as a newbie, you're all right. The housekeeper is the most stressful piece of the puzzle. And I've kind of turned that into a science, just for me personally. And I share my experience in my Monday course with our clients, of course. But I'm actually going through that right now. My first time in 5 years, I think, that I've hired a new housekeeper, and I got to tell you, it is not the same as it used to be. I mean, back in the day, we were like posting ads in the gas station, had to drive to town if you were out of town, if you were living out of town or whatever, because almost everybody, nobody lives near where these properties are. That's the whole reason we got into it to begin with. We couldn't buy where we lived; it was too expensive, so we had to go buy somewhere else. Oh well, we can put it on Airbnb. There's no lease. Okay, cool. Let's try that. So, we drove out, I would drive out there, put a help wanted poster in the gas station and hope people would call me and all this craziness. And I was using the enemy method. I do still think that the enemy method is the most difficult way to find the best housekeeper. It takes a lot of work and selling yourself to other hosts, much like I did when I was looking for back in the day for help. But if you can find an enemy that is willing to talk to you and has a lot of good reviews and they're willing to give you their housekeeper's phone number, that's worth gold. Why would they do that? Yeah, that's, you gotta provide some kind of value to them, whether it's, I think the best way to approach that is to just kind of make them feel like they're changing your life a little bit is a pretty good way to do it. Like, oh man, I didn't realize that, I could help other people in this business. Some people are going to take comfort in that and throw you a bone, find a good housekeeper. But anyway, my point is, we are now, I'm looking for a housekeeper, and with technology where it is, Facebook, etc. The Facebook has made a big difference in finding housekeepers, because back 6 years ago, they weren't necessarily, they were probably using it more for personal reasons. And now Facebook is for everything. And I had them coming out of the woodwork, new housekeepers, just people left and right, private message, just posted one ad. And I had people coming left and right, private messaging me saying, hey, I want to clean your property. Problem is that most of them, you're hiring an employee, so you have to get good at that. And most of them are probably not going to fit the mold. So I was able to weed most of them out just on Facebook messaging alone. And then I narrowed it down to a few that I ended up calling, as opposed to back in the day where I would try and track down 30 different phone numbers. But anyway, so as you can see, the housekeeper conversation can go on for quite some time. I do recommend that you don't take too much, don't get too stressed out about hiring the first housekeeper. I find that they generally only last about 5 months, and it's usually your fault because you don't know what you're doing. You don't have any experience. You're going to put too much pressure on your housekeeper. You're going to make them do checklists and send you a bunch of pictures, and you're just one of 15 properties that they clean. So if you're the house that they show up to that day that they're rolling their eyes over, that's not good. You gotta be really nice to them and treat them with respect and I'd throw them a bone, pay them a little extra. Of course, then you're going to have some housekeepers that are charging too much out of the gate. So you got to balance that. And I don't hire a housekeeper based on how much they charge, though. I hire based on the vibe. I could go on about this all day. The housekeeper is, again, for noobs, the most stressful part, but it's just one of many.
Yeah. And a good housekeeper really is gold. They are your eyes and ears. They are going to be the ones to tell you, hey, it's time to replace this one thing, or hey, looks like this, you need to call somebody to clean these really high windows, because a lot of them don't do that. That's just an example. But they're going to be the people that are keeping an eye on things, and it's in their best interest. So a lot of people, investor wise, seem to be worried about housekeepers just not showing up because they don't feel like it, but it's in their best interest to make sure that your property is in the best condition possible, because if you're not getting good reviews and you're not getting rentals, that means they're not in there cleaning, they're not getting cleaning gigs, and they're not making money either. So the good housekeepers are going to tell you everything that's going on with your property every time they're in there.
Best way to get a good housekeeper is to be a good host. Don't be annoying to your housekeeper, and also do your best to filter out the junky guests, because the worse the guests are, the harder the housekeeper has to work. And yeah, so the better host you are, the better your housekeeper is going to be, and the better the reviews are. And that's what it's all about.
You said something really important there. So weeding out the junky guests. So a lot of new investors get really caught up in taking every single guest and getting every single night booked. So can you talk a little bit about avoiding bad reviews by weeding out bad guests up front and how you do that?
It must be done. It has to be done. People don't listen to me when I preach this. And I wouldn't have listened to myself, honestly, when I was brand new, because you're freaking out. You just spent all this chunk of dough on a property. You don't even know if the property's going to, you might end up losing your butt, and your family's looking at you funny because you got another mortgage now and all this stuff. So, but the truth of the matter is, if you're in a vacation market, Avery preaches about drivable vacation markets. Anywhere where the short-term shop operates, and there's several others in the nation. If you're in a vacation market, you will have more guests than you know what to do with. Now, that being said, if you're on the beach, you're going to have a 3-month, off. It's like a teacher. You're like opposite months of a teacher. You're going to have 3 months off in the winter, and it's awesome. That doesn't mean that property's not going to produce as much as one in the mountains. It just only produces for 9-ish, 10, 8 months a year. But I'm here to tell you, I preach it constantly. You will have so many bookings. You will be very pleasantly surprised with the amount of bookings. There are exceptions to that. If you're charging too much, for instance, great rule of thumb, if you're not getting booked, you're charging too much. If you're too booked, you're not charging enough. Very simple, common sense. But here's my best piece of advice, the easiest piece of advice, and one that I practice myself. Okay, here's a real example. I had one this morning. It came in late last night. By the way, if they message it late at night, I do take that into consideration. That is, in my opinion, a guest that's not that great. I don't look at my phone in the middle of the night, but at 2:00 in the morning, if I wake up at 4, and I do an hour worth of work before I go for my run. I'm a miracle morning guy. So from 4 to 5, I do generally, at least I check in with my VA, my employees who help me with this stuff. I have one full-time guy, and then a few others. So I check in with him. I make him a video to get the day started in case, because I might not be available when he comes on to work at the hour he comes on. I might be in a meeting or something. So I generally make him a quick little 5-10 minute video, say, hey, this is what today's going to look like. Let's do this thing. And in that process, I do kind of cruise through what happened on Vrbo and Airbnb. And if I see one that came in at 3:00 in the morning, I'm rolling my eyes. I might even, because I use a software, right? I use a property management software that auto pre-approves everybody. So if they send me a message and my software auto pre-approves them, and I see it came in at 3 in the morning, I might unpre-approve them and sometimes even go so far as decline. I don't recommend declining on either platform, because it's not great for your rankings. It's not great for your analytics. It's not a terrible thing. I don't mind declining occasionally. Canceling, that's a whole nother story. You cannot cancel. Cannot do that ever. It's dropping a bomb on your listing. But now I'm going off on a rabbit hole. The late night thing is I don't mean to put so much emphasis on that. That's just one little thing. The big thing is when they ask a lot of questions. If they're asking me, and I'll get back to I mentioned I had a real world example. I'll get back to that. If they're asking me a lot of ridiculous questions, and I don't even have a specific example, but let's say that they ask me what thread count my sheets are. I'm going to say, our sheets are microfiber. It's probably not the house for you. I don't want that guest, because, and normally that question is followed by 1 or 2 or 3 other questions, additional questions. They want attention. They're probably overextenuating themselves on this vacation. They're probably spending more than they can afford. So they want everything to be absolutely perfect. And when they get to your house, there is no way to meet that expectation on somebody who's overextended. So you just kind of have to try and shy them away a little bit, So I will say, hey, we got microfiber, probably not the right house for you. I can't any more specific examples, but I will. So that one that I mentioned that came in the middle of the night, let me go over that. She said, and this was on my most expensive property. We're talking a property that I get sometimes up. I think her reservation was somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 a night. So she says to me, I'm a super host from Texas, and I would love to stay in your property, but I need to know if you could give me a discount. So no, absolutely no discounts ever. I totally need you. I need all new hosts out there to listen to me when I say that. You don't want to offer discounts, because if you offer discounts, you're throwing them a bone. You're giving them an inch, and they will take you 7,000 miles. Don't do it. Don't do it. For my father, like I said, military. My whole family's military. I won't even give military discounts. My prices again are set fairly well. I don't feel like I need to give discounts. So anyway. Oh, one more thing on that. Other Airbnb Vrbo hosts tend to make terrible guests anyway. And I've learned this the hard way, because they'll sit there and say, hey, I'm a super host. You need to let me come stay in your property. And then when they get there, all they do is rip your property apart and pick apart every little thing that they would have done differently in that property. And then boom, 3 stars. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. You live your life on these reviews. You just hit me with a bad one. Where's karma? It's coming, dude. Karma's coming for you, So this lady, she ended up coming back. We told her the answer she didn't want to hear. And I don't remember exactly the back and forth. She came back again, and she asked some ridiculous, stupid question. And we were like, you know what? There's plenty of other properties. You might want to check somewhere else out. Have a nice day. So long story short, if you get the vibe that they're going to be kind of high maintenance or annoying, they are going to be. Probably more so than if you're getting that vibe right out of the gate, it's going to be bad. And again, it all goes back to reviews. The reviews are, unfortunately, everything in this business. And it can be difficult to deal with at times. But that's a fantastic way to nip it in the bud and get rid of the bad review before it ever happens.
Awesome. So you're saying that by giving them the answer that they don't want to hear to their questions, once you've kind of decided, all right, this person is going to be pretty high maintenance, will probably give me a bad review, you just simply get rid of them by telling them the answer that they're not looking for.
Absolutely. Yep. I do it all the time.
Genius. So you mentioned that you use some software to kind of help you manage these things. What does that look like? What platform are you using?
So there's several to choose from. There's different types of softwares. There's the main ones are going to be property management software and pricing software. Property management softwares will automate most of the dirty work for you, get it to the point where you don't really have to do anything other than the emotional questions and ridiculousness that the general public is going to have while they're going on vacation. Because you got to remember, people on vacation tend to be a little more high maintenance than they would be in real life. But property management software will automate most of that stuff for you. It'll leave your reviews for you. It will keep your listing fresh for you, because if you move things around in your listings, you'll stay at the top of the ranking system. Now, the most hosts are going to be moving stuff around enough on their own that they don't necessarily need that, but it's nice to have. So mostly it's like next level messaging and automation for the messages is the most important part. And then there's pricing softwares. Let me touch on a few name brand property management softwares. There's dozens of them. I mean, just dozens of them. And all of them, honestly, are fairly similar. They just are kind of, they've been developed by a different brain. So a lot of the just clicking around you would do on your dashboard, things are just in a different place on one software to the other. A lot of them, I hate to generalize, are going to be pretty similar to one another. It just kind of depends on which one clicks best with your brain. You can also, with most of them that are available, you can schedule a Zoom with their sales department and decide if that software is for you. So I recommend that. But the bigger ones out there are Beds24 is a big one, Hostfully. And within the short-term shop, we recommend 4 to choose from. that fit what we do. And those are IGMS. IGMS is kind of the OG. They were the first to get Verbo integration. Your Porter, IGMS and Your Porter are almost identical, except for Your Porter has terrible customer service. Terrible. Smart B&B. Smart B&B is not API, meaning it doesn't directly integrate to your Verbo and Airbnb dashboard. It simply sits on top of it and kind of pulls the strings. And then OwnerRez is the fourth that we recommend. OwnerRez it's more for folks who want to start their own website and try and get their own bookings at johnnyscabins.com and then you would most likely be spending money on Facebook advertisements to accomplish this, social media advertisements, Google ads, click ads, etc. And if you are using OwnerRez, by the way, you're going to want to use Smart B&B with it. You're going to need to use both of them because OwnerRez, for instance, will not automate reviews, which is a big time suck. Leaving reviews is a kind of a waste. It's a lot of work. Just a couple of things that OwnerRez won't do that Smart B&B will do for you. You can use them in combination. And then pricing, really there's three, but only two that we feel fit our mold. So there's Beyond Pricing, which is very sexy and easy to use and very user friendly and simple. It doesn't take a lot of work to integrate. You just log in and you're done basically. It's not necessarily inexpensive. It does charge 1% of your gross, which includes, of course, gross is gross. It does include cleaning fees. Beyond, I usually recommend Beyond for somebody who's like stupid busy, like a surgeon, or maybe somebody who's about to have a baby, and just doesn't want to use a property manager. So throw it on Beyond Pricing and you're kind of done with the pricing, because the pricing used to be back in the day before all these fancy softwares, when I first started Uphill Both Ways in the Snow, it was a lot of work. It was the most important part of the business, because the pricing is how much money you make. And if you don't do it right, you can sink the ship. But anyway, so the next choice would be Price Labs, which is I absolutely recommend. With property management softwares, I think there's no wrong answer. You can kind of pick which one works best for you. I'm personally using Your Porter at the moment. Doesn't mean I will be in 3 months. I've been with them for about a year and a half. And Price Labs is absolutely a game changer, in my opinion. Again, Beyond will do most of the things, but the thing with Price Labs, it's a little more robust. It's a little more customizable. You got a few more functions that Beyond doesn't have. It's also very inexpensive. One downside is the website is not very user friendly. It's a little ugly. It kind of looks like somebody from junior high may have made this website. Their customer service is fantastic. I will say Price Labs is. I can't live without. I think it's amazing. I love it. I trust it. That being said, it's a job. It's a job in itself. You can't just turn Price Labs on and go. You do need to pay attention to it. You need to adjust your low, your base, and your max, min, base, and max prices on there. And I do that using what I call the 6-week method, which you can find a video on that on the Short Term Shop YouTube.
Awesome. So a lot to unpack there. We got a little bit in the weeds. Maybe we can do an entire other episode, just the platforms. I think that would be really helpful.
If you don't mind, can I go back to the property buying thing really quick and just kind of wrap that up?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, because the management really is kind of a whole nother episode. But once we got to, I guess it would have been our 6th property. You've got a funnel, right? So basically at this point, I've got X percentage of all my bookings in my long-term. I only had maybe one or two at this point, long-term rentals. You funnel X percent of all of that cash, whatever you're making, into basically a separate bank account. I use the book Profit First. This is, again, a whole nother episode we could do. Long story short, once you kind of get past that hump of learning how to talk to loan people, that's a big part of it, and get the financing and get, the first 5-6 properties and worrying about DTI. Then the floodgates are going to open, then the properties can start buying themselves. And that is when things really heat up.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm not sure why you're laughing at me.
I'm not sure how you went from Price Labs to that, but
well, rabbit holes.
Yeah. Okay. So last 3 questions of the episode. We may do another episode on just the management platform side because there is a lot to go through there. What advice would you give 20-year-old Luke?
Wouldn't be possible. You could not give 20-year-old Luke advice. He would have just spit in your face, unfortunately. But I don't know. I really don't think it would have been possible. And I think that is exactly why I am where I am today. I would just never take anything from anybody. Just get to. I don't know. It's a terrible answer, but it just really would not have worked.
I can definitely see that, how that would not have worked.
You would have gotten a couple of middle fingers.
Honest answer. So kind of piggybacking off of that, what advice would you give to a newbie who's trying to get started in real estate investing right now?
Stop getting in your own way. Don't worry so much about inspection reports. You don't want to buy a house that's falling over, but I mean, hey, let me tell this story real quick. Again, rabbit hole. I had a new inspector. You got to get to know inspectors. It's part of your job. It's just like learning to deal with lenders and mortgage brokers. What's the difference between a lender and a mortgage broker? Do you even know what the difference is? You got to figure that stuff out. So, I had a new inspector on a property in a market that I'm just barely in. I'm in 5 different states with my properties, right? So, we are. Sorry, it's I can't see you. So anyway, but so we are in 5 different states. I had a new inspector on a property in a state that I'm not that deep into yet in a market. And this guy came back and said the subfloors were messed up, the floors were squishy, and I passed on it. Mostly because I was in a hurry. I was getting ready to go out of town or something. I didn't have time to deal with it. And a squishy subfloor is not that big a deal. Generally, you just replace the plywood and you go. But you never know. It could be the joists. So I ended up doing 2 more inspections like a week later, which is funny because we're talking about buying the first couple of properties. And now I'm to the point where I'm doing 4 inspections a week. It's awesome. But anyway, guess what happened? Well, guess what came up on both of those inspections on these 2 other properties? Squishy subfloor. And I'm like, this guy just likes to he's cut and pasting this. You know what I mean? He's using a template. So I kind of learned that this home inspector is going to put squishy subfloor on every damn inspection. So I bought those 2 houses, and you got to learn. I'm not telling you to go buy squishy subfloor houses, but you got to learn what's going to work for you. I mean, hell, I bought a house one time, forgot to get an inspection. That's a pretty good story. But don't get in your own way. Don't let some stupid little piece stop you. Because I've never met anybody that you really never meet anybody that regrets buying it. You meet a lot of people who just go back to their whatever life they were living before and hoping they get a pension someday.
I've never heard anybody say that they regret buying a property. I've only heard people say that they regret not buying properties.
We had one that ended up being not that great of a situation eventually, but guess what? We put it on the market, we sold it, and I turned a pretty damn big profit. And I 1031 into another property.
Awesome. So last question, and I know you read a lot of books, so I'm going to have to ask you to keep it brief. But what is your favorite book that you've read recently that has impacted your mindset?
As always, Avery's telling me to stop talking so much. But the favorite book I read recently, I'm sorry, the full quote.
Oh, that has impacted your mindset.
Oh man. Brief is not going to happen. Sorry. So I started the year out with a book called Don't Be a Dick, which completely changed the way I think about things. Honestly, I've been a dick for a long time, and trying to pull it off by just masking it with humor. But that book really did change the way my brain works, and like every little thing that comes out of my mouth now, I'm like, man, you were kind of a dick. Don't do that, you know. And used to be, I would never think of that at all. I would just keep steamrolling. And so don't be a dick. Fantastic. By the way, I've recommended it to several people and they didn't like it. And I think it's because they weren't dicks.
Watch it with the D word.
Oh, sorry. Name of the book. Don't be a D word. And then I also just read Emotional. What is it?
Emotional Intelligence 2.0.
Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is teaching me. It's honestly, I feel like that book is a little bit kind of a little bit more modern version of How to Win Friends and Influence People. So that one I liked a lot. And right now I'm actually reading Peak Performance, which I'm really digging. It's written by a runner, and I'm a huge runner. So his brain and my brain work the same way. And that one is really helping me out as well.
That was decently brief. You did a pretty good job.
I can keep going. I can totally keep going. A lot of book reading going on.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. A lot of really good information here. We'll definitely have you on again. And where can everyone find you who's listening?
Well, I would like to. We should do a whole show just on the funnel that I was mentioning. You know, how to take the money from the properties and put it into a property. Mm-hmm. I teach classes on that within the short-term shop, and everybody loves it. I think we should do that. Find me nowhere. Find me being a good dad.
To be found.
I don't want to be found. I want to be at the park with my kids. But at shorttermshop.com, and I'm the guy that does the YouTubes for the most part on our YouTube channel. And Bigger Pockets. I'm a huge Bigger Pocket fan. I've been hanging out on that Facebook, the short-term rental forum since basically the day it was created, and I had no clue what I was doing. Please don't go look back at my early posts. It was terrible and pathetic, but I still do hang out on there and try to respond as much as possible. And I love hearing from people on BP. We're big fans.
Love BP. They're the best. So thank you so much for coming, and we hope to have you back soon.
Anytime.